The rope creaked in the morning wind. 1946, Marcus Garvey Park, 6:23 a.m. An elderly woman walking her dog saw it first, a shape hanging from the old oak tree near the park's north entrance. At first, she thought it was clothing, someone's laundry blown into the branches. Then she got closer, and she started screaming. NYPD arrived at 6:47 a.m. Detective Robert Walsh was the first to reach the tree. What he saw made him stop walking, made his breath catch, made him understand that this wasn't just a crime scene. This was a message. A young black man, maybe 19, maybe 20, hanging from a noose tied to a thick branch, his feet 3 feet off the ground, his head tilted at an angle that made it clear he died slowly, painfully. He was wearing a Columbia University sweatshirt, khaki pants, one shoe missing. His hands showed deep rope burns. He'd fought, struggled, tried to free himself. But 5 men had been stronger than one teenager. Pinned to his chest was a note, handwritten in crude block letters. Coloreds, know your place. Walsh looked around the park. Early Sunday morning, nobody around. But this tree was visible from 3 different streets. Whoever did this wanted people to see, wanted the message to spread, wanted Harlem to know that even in New York City, even in 1946, the terror could reach them. This was a lynching in Harlem, in the North. The boy's wallet was still in his pocket. Walsh pulled it out with shaking hands. Columbia University student ID. Name, Thomas Johnson. Walsh felt the blood drain from his face. Not Johnson. Please God, not that Johnson. His partner, Detective Sullivan, walked up. Who is he? Walsh's voice was barely a whisper. Thomas Johnson. So, we got an ID, we notify. His uncle is Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. The 2 detectives stood in silence, both understanding immediately what this meant, what was about to happen. Sullivan looked at the body, at the note, at the evidence of murder that was impossible to miss. What do we write in the report? Walsh stared at the ground for a long moment. He thought about his 20 years on the force, about the oath he'd taken, about justice and law and everything he was supposed to represent. Then he thought about the reality. 5 white men had lynched a black teenager, and even if Walsh arrested them, even if he somehow identified them and brought charges, no jury in 1946 would convict them. The system would fail, the way it always failed. Suicide, Walsh said finally. But I said suicide. Walsh looked at his partner. His voice was harder now. We write suicide. We file it, we notify the family, and then we stay out of whatever happens next. You think Bumpy Johnson will? I think those 5 men just signed their own death warrants, and I think the best thing we can do for everyone is look the other way. Sullivan was quiet, then nodded. Suicide. Got it. They cut down Thomas Johnson's body, loaded it into the coroner's van, filed the paperwork, and waited for the storm they knew was coming. Thomas Johnson was 19 years old, first-year student at Columbia University, pre-law. He wanted to be a civil rights attorney, wanted to fight injustice in courtrooms instead of on streets. He was brilliant, quiet, wore thick-rimmed glasses, carried books everywhere. His professors said he had one of the sharpest legal minds they'd seen in years. Thomas lived with his mother, Ruth Johnson, Bumpy's older sister, in a modest apartment on 135th Street. Every Sunday morning at 6 a.m., he'd walk through Marcus Garvey Park to get to Abyssinian Baptist Church. Same route, same time. Someone had been watching, planning, waiting for the right moment. The KKK in 1946 wasn't just a Southern problem. Secret cells operated in northern cities, New York, Chicago, Boston. They met in basements and warehouses, wore respectable faces during the day and white hoods at night. In Harlem, a 15-man cell met every other Friday in a warehouse on East 98th Street. They worked normal jobs, mechanics, factory workers, store clerks. Nobody suspected them. On September 13th, they drew straws to choose 5 men for a special assignment, to send Harlem a message, to remind the coloreds that no matter how much success they achieved, no matter how far they climbed, they could still be pulled down, still be put in their place. Danny Morrison, Rick Sullivan, Lou Bennett, Frank Dorsey, Charlie Ross. They chose Thomas Johnson because he was visible, successful, educated, everything they hated, everything that threatened their view of how the world should work. On the morning of September 15th, 1946, those 5 men waited in Marcus Garvey Park. At 6:05 a.m., Thomas Johnson walked into the park carrying his Bible. He never made it to church. They came out of the shadows, 5 men. No hoods. This wasn't a ceremony. This was execution. Thomas saw them, tried to run, made it maybe 20 feet before they tackled him. He fought. Thomas was small, 5'7", maybe 140 pounds, but he fought with everything he had. His glasses flew off. His Bible fell into the grass. 5 grown men held him down. Danny Morrison pulled rope from his coat, the same rope he'd practiced tying nooses with at their last meeting. Thomas was crying, "Please, I didn't do anything. Please." Charlie Ross hesitated. For just a moment, he saw what they were really doing, not punishing a criminal, murdering a teenager, someone's son. But Danny threw the rope over the oak tree branch, put the noose around Thomas's neck, and pulled. The other 4 joined him. Thomas's feet left the ground. He kicked, gasped. His hands clawed at the rope around his neck, leaving burns that would be visible when the police found him. It took 4 minutes. 4 minutes of struggling, of suffocating, of dying slowly, while 5 men held the rope and watched. When Thomas finally stopped moving, they pinned the note to his chest. "Coloreds, know your place." Then they walked away, back to their lives, their families, their normal Sunday mornings, confident that nothing would come of it, that the police would look the other way, that Thomas Johnson was just another dead colored boy in a city full of them. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. Bumpy Johnson received the phone call at 7:12 a.m. Illinois Gordon's voice was shaking. "Boss, it's Thomas, Ruth's boy. They found him in Marcus Garvey Park. He's gone." Bumpy didn't respond. Couldn't. The phone felt heavy in his hand. "Boss? How?" Bumpy's voice was flat, emotionless. "They're saying suicide. But boss, there was a note. KKK." Bumpy hung up without another word. He sat in his office for 10 minutes, completely still, his mind replaying every memory of Thomas, teaching him to play chess when he was 8, watching him graduate high school, driving him to Columbia on his first day, seeing the pride in Ruth's eyes as her son, the first in their family, walked onto that university campus. Finally, Bumpy stood, put on his coat. "I'm going to Ruth's." Ruth Johnson lived 4 blocks away. When Bumpy arrived, she was sitting on her couch, surrounded by neighbors trying to comfort her. But comfort doesn't work when your only child has been lynched. Ruth looked up when Bumpy entered. Her eyes were red, destroyed. "They took my baby." Bumpy sat next to her, took her hand. "I know. The police said suicide, said Thomas hung himself. My boy would never." "It wasn't suicide." "Then what?" "It was murder. 5 men. KKK." Ruth's body shook with sobs. Bumpy held her, let her cry on his shoulder. And as he held his sister, he felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years of running Harlem's underworld. Helplessness. His nephew was dead, and no amount of power, money, or influence could bring him back. But there was something he could do. After Ruth finally cried herself out, Bumpy spoke quietly. "I'm gonna handle this." "Handle what?" "The men who did this." Ruth looked at him. "Will it bring Thomas back?" "No." "Then what's the point?" The point is justice. The point is making sure no other mother in Harlem has to bury her son because some men in hoods thought they could terrorize us. Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then, do what you have to do. But Bumpy, make them understand. Make them feel what I'm feeling. I will. I promise you, sister. They'll understand. At 9 a.m., Bumpy stood under the oak tree in Marcus Garvey Park. The police had removed Thomas's body, cut down the rope, but they'd missed things. Bumpy saw what they had missed. 5 cigarette butts on the ground, different brands, smoked hours before, left in a pile like men waiting. He collected them carefully. 5 different shoe prints in the dirt. He memorized the patterns. Work boots, factory workers probably. A button torn off during the struggle, dark blue, factory uniform style. And something else, a matchbook, half burned, from O'Malley's Tavern on East 96th Street, outside Harlem, a white neighborhood. Bumpy took everything. Then he circled the park, looking for anyone who might have seen something. At the north entrance, he found him, Curtis, an elderly homeless man who slept on a bench most nights, the kind of person people looked through, invisible. Bumpy sat down next to him. Curtis? Curtis tensed. Mr. Johnson, I don't want no trouble. You won't get trouble. You'll get money and protection. Just tell me what you saw this morning. Curtis glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. 5 white men. They came round 5:30 this morning, before sunrise. Sat by that tree, smoking, waiting. I heard them talking, laughing about teaching some uppity Columbia Negro a lesson. Did you hear names? Just one, the tall one with the dark hair. Others called him Danny. Danny what? Didn't catch a last name, but I heard where they were going after. O'Malley's Tavern. Said they always celebrated there after their work. Bumpy handed Curtis $200. You never saw anything. You weren't here, understand? Curtis nodded. The money disappeared into his coat. He left the park quickly. Bumpy returned to his office, made a phone call to Joey O'Brien, a bartender who owed him favors. O'Malley's Tavern. There's a group that meets there. White men. Probably came in early this morning, celebrating. I need names. 3 hours later, Joey called back. Got 'em. 5 guys came in around 7:30 a.m., drunk already, loud, bragging about taking care of business in Harlem. Names, Danny Morrison, Rick Sullivan, Lou Bennett, Frank Dorsey, and Charlie Ross. Bumpy wrote the names down carefully. They regulars? Yeah, come in every other Friday night. Meet in the back room with about 10 other guys. Real secretive. My boss says there's some kind of club. What kind of club? Joey's voice dropped. The kind that wears hoods, if you know what I mean. Bumpy knew. Thanks, Joey. You've paid your debt. By 8 p.m. on day 2, Bumpy had complete files on all 5 men, where they lived, where they worked, their families, their routines, everything. He called his 4 most trusted men to his office, Illinois Gordon, Willie Lee, James Quick Jackson, and Marcus Cole, men who'd been with him through wars, through prison, through hell. 5 names, Bumpy said quietly. They lynched Thomas. Now they pay. 7 days, 5 men. Each one understands what they took from my sister, what they took from Harlem. He handed out assignments, surveillance, equipment, planning. And when this is over, Bumpy continued, we're burning down their whole operation. Every man in that KKK cell disappears. They think they can bring Southern terror to Harlem? We're going to teach them that Harlem doesn't scare. The 4 men nodded. They'd known Thomas, watched him grow up. This wasn't just business. This was family. One more thing, Bumpy said. Document everything. Photographs, evidence. I want proof of what they did, so if anyone asks later, we can show them exactly why these men had to pay. Danny Morrison worked at an auto repair shop in the Bronx, lived alone in a small house with a garage. On September 17th at 8 p.m., Danny was in that garage working on his car when his world ended. 3 men entered through the side door. Danny didn't recognize them, didn't have time to react. They moved like professionals, silent, efficient. One hand over his mouth, the other arm twisted behind his back. Danny tried to fight. He was strong, worked with his hands, lifted engines daily. But these men knew what they were doing. They bound his hands with rope, the same type of rope Danny had used on Thomas. Then Willie Lee threw another rope over the garage's ceiling beam. Danny's eyes went wide. He understood. He tried to scream against the gag, shook his head violently. His eyes were pleading, but Willie's face was stone. "You know what you did. You know why we're here." They put the noose around Danny's neck. Then they lifted him, slowly, let him feel the rope tightening, let him kick and struggle and feel the panic of suffocating. After 30 seconds, they lowered him, let him breathe. Danny gasped, cried, thought maybe they'd show mercy. They lifted him again. 3 times they did this, pulling him up, letting him suffocate, dropping him just before he'd pass out, pulling him up again, teaching him what Thomas had felt in those final 4 minutes. On the 4th time, they left him hanging. They also set up a camera, took photographs, evidence that this had happened, that justice had been served. When Danny's wife found him at 6 p.m. the next day, there was a note pinned to his chest. 1 down, 4 to go. You knew your place. Now you're in it. Harlem remembers. Thomas Johnson. Rick Sullivan was more careful after hearing about Danny, started looking over his shoulder, locked his doors. But he still had to work, still had to go to his job at the factory, still had to come home to his garage where he kept his tools. On September 18th, Rick came home from work at 5:30 p.m., went to his garage to fix a broken lawnmower. He didn't notice that someone had been inside earlier, didn't notice the faint smell of gasoline, didn't notice that his emergency exit, a window he always kept unlocked, had been nailed shut from outside. Rick worked for 20 minutes. Then he heard something behind him. He turned around, saw liquid spreading across the concrete floor. His gasoline can was tipped over, but he hadn't touched it. Then he understood. This wasn't an accident. Rick ran for the door, pulled the handle, locked from outside. He spun toward the window, ran to it, pulled. It wouldn't budge. Nailed shut. Panic rising, Rick grabbed a wrench, started pounding on the door. That's when he saw it, coming through the mail slot. A lit match. Rick screamed, "No!" The match fell into the gasoline. The garage exploded in flames. Rick threw himself at the door. The old wood splintered on his 3rd impact. He fell through onto the driveway, his entire body on fire. Neighbors ran over with blankets, beat out the flames, called an ambulance. Rick survived. Barely. 60% of his body was covered in 3rd-degree burns. His face was melted, unrecognizable. He'd spend 8 months in the hospital, the rest of his life in bandages and constant pain, unable to work, unable to have anything resembling a normal life. The fire department found a note outside the garage, pinned to the mailbox, untouched by flames. 2 down, 3 to go. You burned crosses to terrorize families. Now you know how fire feels. Thomas felt this too. Lou Bennett was a hunter, loved the outdoors. So when he told his wife he needed to get away from the city after hearing about Danny and Rick, she understood. What Lou didn't know was that Quick Jackson and Marcus Cole had been following him for 2 days, knew his plans before he did. On September 19th, Lou drove 3 hours upstate, parked at a remote trailhead, started hiking into the woods. He'd been walking for an hour when the sounds started. Footsteps, behind him, always just out of sight. Lou turned around, saw nothing but trees. He kept walking. The footsteps matched his pace. Lou walked faster. The footsteps did too. Then he heard it, a voice, distant, echoing through the forest. Lou. He froze. Lou Bennett. The voice seemed to come from everywhere, from the trees, from the ground, from inside his own head. You helped kill Thomas Johnson. Lou ran, sprinted through the woods, off the trail, deep into the wilderness. For 3 days, Lou wandered those woods. Quick and Marcus took turns, following at a distance, making sounds, leaving signs that someone was watching, never letting Lou rest, never letting him feel safe. Every time Lou tried to sleep, he'd hear the voice. Every time he found a stream, he'd see movement in the shadows. Every time he thought he was alone, he'd hear footsteps. On the 3rd day, Lou was broken, delirious, crying, begging trees for forgiveness, talking to Thomas Johnson's ghost. Search parties found him on September 22nd, wandering in circles, dehydrated, traumatized beyond description. Doctors couldn't explain it. No injuries beyond dehydration, no drugs in his system, just psychological trauma so complete that Lou would spend the next year in a psychiatric facility, still hearing the voice in his dreams. In his hand, a note. 3 down, 2 to go. You hunted a boy like an animal. Now you know what it feels like to be prey. The woods remember. Frank Dorsey was terrified. 3 of his friends destroyed in 5 days. He moved his family to a hotel. Figured they'd be safer away from home. But Illinois Gordon had been watching Frank for 6 days, knew exactly where he'd moved, knew his routine, knew when the hotel room would be empty. On September 20th at 2 a.m., Frank's house caught fire. Fire trucks arrived within minutes, but the house was already fully engulfed. Gasoline had been poured around the foundation, windows broken to feed oxygen to the flames. By the time firefighters controlled it, there was nothing left. Everything Frank owned, every photograph, every memory, his children's toys, his wife's jewelry, gone. The fire chief found Frank at the hotel. "Mr. Dorsey, I'm sorry. Your house is a total loss. And, sir, this was arson, professional arson." Frank just nodded. He'd known it was coming. On the mailbox of his burned house, they found a note. 4 down, 1 to go. You destroyed a family's future. Now you understand loss. 1 more left. Charlie Ross was the only one left. He'd watched 4 friends destroyed in 6 days, and he knew, absolutely knew, that tonight was his turn. At 5:30 a.m. on September 21st, Charlie made a decision. He'd go to the police, confess everything, go to prison. Anywhere was safer than the streets. He got in his car, started driving to the 28th precinct. He didn't notice the car following him. Didn't notice when it boxed him in on a quiet street 3 blocks from the station. Illinois Gordon stepped out, walked to Charlie's window, knocked. Charlie looked up, saw Gordon's face, understood immediately. "Get out of the car, Charlie." "Please, I'm going to turn myself in. I'll confess. I'll—" "Get out of the car." Charlie got out. His legs were shaking. "You were going to run," Illinois said, "like a coward." "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to do it. Danny made us." "Danny's dead." "I know. Please, let me go. I'll leave New York. You'll never see me again." Illinois pulled out a photograph. Thomas Johnson, smiling, wearing his Columbia sweatshirt. His name was Thomas. He was 19 years old. He wanted to be a lawyer, and you put a rope around his neck and pulled. Charlie was crying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring him back." Illinois leaned closer. Here's what's going to happen. You're not going to prison. You're not running to California. You're going to the warehouse on 98th Street. What? No, I can't. You can and you will, because you're going to deliver a message to your KKK friends. Tonight at 9 p.m., all 15 of you are going to meet at that warehouse, and you're going to vote. Disband and leave New York, or stay and face what Danny, Rick, Lou, and Frank faced. They'll never leave. Some of them will want to fight. I know, and that's fine, because if they vote to stay, we burn that warehouse down, with all of you inside, and the NYPD will call it an accident, just like they called Thomas's lynching a suicide. Illinois put the photograph back in his pocket. You have a choice, Charlie. Convince your people to disband or die with them. Those are your only options. Illinois got back in his car, drove away. Charlie stood on that street for 10 minutes, then he drove to the warehouse. At 9 p.m. on September 21st, 15 men gathered in the warehouse on East 98th Street, the full KKK cell. Charlie told them everything. About Danny hanging in his garage, about Rick burning, about Lou going insane, about Frank's house reduced to ash. And they gave us an ultimatum, Charlie said, his voice shaking. Disband tonight, leave New York, where they burned this warehouse down with us inside. Some men laughed. One colored gangster threatening 15 of us? He's bluffing. Others weren't sure. 5 of our men are destroyed in 6 days. Maybe we should what, run? We're the KKK. We don't back down. The argument escalated, voices rising. Some wanted to leave. Others wanted to stay and fight. Finally, they voted. 10 voted to stay. 5 voted to disband. The 5 who voted to leave, including Charlie, walked out immediately. You're making a mistake, Charlie said at the door. They're coming. Let them come, one of the remaining men said. We'll be ready. Charlie left, got in his car, drove straight to the bus station. Outside the warehouse, hidden in shadows across the street, Bumpy Johnson and his 4 men watched the 5 leave. Counted. 15 went in, 5 came out. 10 stayed, Illinois said. Bumpy nodded. Then 10 burn. At 11:45 p.m., the attack began. Willie Lee and Quick Jackson moved to opposite sides of the warehouse. Each carried 3 Molotov cocktails. Marcus Cole positioned himself at the back exit. Illinois took the front. Bumpy stood across the street, watching. At 11:47 p.m., the first Molotov went through a window, then another, and another. 6 bottles of gasoline and fire crashed into the warehouse. The building erupted in flames. Men inside started screaming, running for exits. The front door was chained from outside. Illinois had locked it while they were arguing. The back door opened. 3 men ran out. Marcus Cole let them run. They were burned, traumatized, broken. That was enough. 7 men died in that fire. Trapped inside, burned alive. Fire department's official report, accidental fire, likely cause, improper storage of flammable materials and illegal alcohol distillation. The NYPD's investigation, closed within 48 hours, no suspects, no charges. Detective Walsh read the report, added it to his file, and never spoke of it again. By September 23rd, the KKK cell in Harlem was destroyed. 5 men had participated in Thomas Johnson's lynching. Danny Morrison, dead, hanged in his garage. Rick Sullivan, permanently disfigured, 60% burns, life destroyed. Lou Bennett, psychiatric hospital, mind broken. Frank Dorsey, homeless, everything he owned burned. Charlie Ross, fled to California, never returned. 10 more men who'd voted to stay and fight, 7 dead in the warehouse fire, 3 escaped with severe burns and trauma. The remaining KKK members in New York, the ones who hadn't been at that warehouse, disbanded immediately, burned their robes, destroyed their records, disappeared into normal life. The message had been received. Harlem protects its own. Touch Harlem's children, and the cost is everything. Over 3,000 people attended Thomas Johnson's funeral at Abyssinian Baptist Church. The casket was closed. Ruth had insisted. She wanted people to remember Thomas alive, smiling, full of promise. Bumpy stood next to his sister throughout the service, silent. His face showed nothing, but his eyes carried weight that nobody else could see. As the casket was lowered into the ground, Bumpy placed something on top, a photograph. Thomas in his Columbia sweatshirt, holding a law book, smiling, and 5 other photographs, Danny Morrison hanging, Rick Sullivan's burned face, Lou Bennett being carried from the woods, Frank Dorsey's destroyed house, the warehouse burning. Underneath, a note. Thomas, they paid. All of them. Every man who touched you. Every man who supported them. Harlem delivered justice. Rest easy, nephew. Your mother is safe. Your neighborhood is safe. Nobody will do this again. I promise. Uncle Bumpy. Ruth saw the photographs, put her hand on Bumpy's arm. Is it over? It's over. Did they understand? Did they feel what I felt? Bumpy looked at his sister. Every single one of them understands loss now, understands pain, understands what it feels like to have everything taken away. Ruth nodded. Good. She placed a flower on the casket. My baby wanted to be a lawyer, wanted to fight injustice in courtrooms. I know. But the courtrooms failed him. The police failed him. The system failed him. I know. Ruth looked at Bumpy. So you became his justice. Yes, thank you. They stood together as the casket disappeared into the earth, as 3,000 people from Harlem said goodbye to the lawyer they would never have, the future that had been stolen. In 1963, 17 years later, a reporter asked Bumpy Johnson about Thomas, about September 1946. Mr. Johnson, rumors have persisted for years that you were responsible for the deaths and attacks on 12 men in September 1946, men who were allegedly connected to your nephew's death. Would you care to comment? Bumpy was 61 years old, still sharp, still dangerous, but tired in ways that youth never understands. My nephew wanted to be a lawyer, wanted to fight injustice through the legal system. He believed in courtrooms, in judges, in the law. And you? I believed in the law too, until the law called my nephew's lynching a suicide, until the police filed it away and did nothing, until the system that Thomas believed in failed him completely. So you took justice into your own hands? I didn't take anything. Justice was owed. The courts wouldn't deliver it, so it came from somewhere else. But doesn't that make you just as bad as who? Bumpy's voice was sharp now. As the men who lynched a 19-year-old for being black and educated? As the police who covered it up? As a system that's been failing black families since this country was founded? The reporter was quiet. You want to know if I regret it? Bumpy continued. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that in 1946, 1 year after we fought a war against fascism overseas, we still had to fight terrorism here at home. I regret that my nephew died believing the system would protect him. But the men who died got exactly what they gave. They took a life. Lives were taken from them. They destroyed a future. Their futures were destroyed. That's not revenge. That's balance. Bumpy stood up. The interview was over. One more thing, he said at the door. After September 1946, the KKK never operated in Harlem again, not once in 17 years. You know why? Because sometimes the only thing that stops terror is the certainty that terror will be answered. That's not me being a criminal. That's me being what the law should have been. The reporter never published the interview, but the story lived on, passed through Harlem like legend, like warning, like promise. Touch Harlem's children, and Harlem will touch you back, not with lawyers and courtrooms, with something older, something more final. Thomas Johnson wanted to be a lawyer, but his uncle became his justice, and the 5 men who killed him and the 10 who supported them learned what justice looks like when the system fails. 7 days, 12 men destroyed, one message that lasted for generations. Harlem protects its own. If this story made you think about justice, real justice, when the system fails, hit that subscribe button. We're not glorifying violence. We're telling the truth about what happened when black communities had to protect themselves because nobody else would. Drop a comment. Was this justice or revenge? When the law calls a lynching suicide, what options are left? Where's the line? Turn on notifications. We're bringing you the untold stories of Bumpy Johnson, the moments that didn't make history books, the times when one man stood between his community and terror. Remember Thomas Johnson, 1927, 1946. The lawyer Harlem never got. The reason the KKK never came back. Rest in power.